I'm out here today at the site of the famous Jamestown colony, the first real successful colony here on the East Coast in the United States. Even today, archaeological digs are taking place, and they're discovering things every single day about this colony, about the people that lived here, about early life in this area of the world. At the time, it's kind of hard to imagine a United States without running water, electricity, civilization. And that's exactly what this place was. These people came here seeking treasure and fortune and a new world to build their wealth when they got here. And almost immediately what they ran into was hardship and hard times. And at one point in time, they went through a period known as the starving time. And today, it's just a quiet, flat area where history took place. And you can come out here and visit and learn a little bit about the earliest settlers in the colonies here in what would become the United States of America.
Oh, you're taking video?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Out before me here is the James River, and this leads to the Chesapeake Bay. Many people have wondered why in the world is it that they had such a hard time feeding themselves here when these waters teemed with fish. Well, one very good answer is the records of the first colonists that came here only had 2 fishermen listed. And believe it or not, that is a skill. It is something that you do have to be skilled at in order to survive off of it. Not only that, at the time that they arrived, they were suffering one of the worst droughts in the history of the area. So the water levels were low and the fish were moving out. And even if they caught a large amount of fish to survive off of, they didn't have enough salt to preserve those fish. So this entire area, though it may have been full of fish, it just wasn't reliable for them. Their skill set wasn't what it needed to be. Now, when you walk around the Jamestown colony area, you'll see a lot of things like this right here on the ground. And these are the foundations of some of the earliest buildings that were out here, and you're able to come out here and take a look at this stuff. When they first started doing excavations out here, this is what they were after. The foundations of some of these buildings. Determine where some of these people would have lived, the structure shapes and sizes, and of course, the trash. The trash was an important part of excavation. A lot of the wells, when they dried up, became sort of local trash cans. And down inside of the bottom of those wells would be burnt material and discarded items, old swords, and things that could not be used at that time or repurposed. And that's where a lot of the stuff is. But inside the original fort location, which is directly behind me, some of the most significant finds took place in fireplaces inside of the dwellings. And that's where they found the proof that during the starving time that there was cannibalization here at Jamestown. Now, this is just a magnificent place for you to come walk around, take in the scenery of Virginia, especially here in this flat open area with the breeze blowing, and even on a hot day in summer, this is just a wonderful place to come to and check out. But standing here in these fields and looking around, thinking of the bustling little city that Jamestown once was, you can almost hear the people talk. the animals. And history can kind of come alive in your imagination. As I'm walking out here in Jamestown and you look behind me, I'll be coming up on some remnants here of a structure that was close to the river itself, the James River. Now, why that's significant is during that period in time, colonial Jamestown, colonial Williamsburg period, this isn't like it is today. If you were living down here closer to the river, you were either some sort of a merchant or you were living in the poorhouses. This is where the worst location was. It's where you didn't want to be. It was foul smelling down here. The workers were out here every day pulling things from ships and working from this location. If you were rich, however, you wanted to be a little further away. And we're going to go over there to that location where some of the wealthiest members here in Jamestown would have been. When the settlers arrived here in 1607, one of the main issues that they had on their hand was water. How to get water. And the snows had melted in May of that year. The water was tasting fresh. By the time they spent a few months here, they started to realize that the waters in the local area were starting to become salty during the summer and slimy during the springtime and during the fall time. So this really wasn't potable water. They had a real problem on their hands. Water was surrounding them and they couldn't drink the stuff. So they were digging wells. And even though they had freshwater wells out here, the local area, the swamps that surrounded them, was leading to poisoning of the people that were out here because of the bacteria in the water and things like arsenic level in this water out here. So even though they were surrounded by water, they really didn't have a drop to drink on most days. It was hard for them to figure this out. It's a pretty devastating situation to be in. As you walk around here in Jamestown, you'll notice a lot of large trees and a different variety of trees. Well, so did the settlers. When they were out here and they realized that they weren't going to get rich off of silver and gold, they had to turn to something else. So they started making large boards out of these trees, big, beautiful boards. And England paid note that it was something special to be had from this location. But then the colonists realized that they weren't going to make enough money off of it. It was too costly to ship it overseas. So they had to turn to something else. Thus enters tobacco. Tobacco became the cash crop of this area. And thanks to a crossbred version that was produced over here, a lot of the tobacco being used at that time would eventually come from this location. And that's what made the colony work. One bush or tree in particular that I love out here at Jamestown is this fig bush. They have it kind of protected, but you can still get up to it and check it out. But it's directly behind me here. And during the summertime, the fig bush is all leafed out, and there are plenty of figs that come off of this bush. I love the story behind it, and one of the settlers that was over here, Mrs. Pierce, I believe. And it says here on the sign that a local writer extolled the prosperity of Jamestown and said, Mrs. Pierce, an honest and industrious woman, gathered near 100 bushels of excellent figs. Well, the reason why these figs are so significant is that this is a Mediterranean import. These trees are not natural, or these bushes are not natural to the area. So in order for the figs to be in this location, they would have had to have been imported from another location, planted in the ground here in the colonies, and then still to this day survive. There are figs that still grow here in Jamestown Colony thanks to that import. The three-gabled brick structure which stood near here likely served as a state house from 1646 to 1652. Now, why is this significant? We'll talk a little bit more about this here in just a moment. Now, General Assembly took place in one of the churches here in Jamestown in 1619. And at that time, the assembly was only gathered for the men in the colony. The indentured servants, however, were not a part of it. The American natives to the area were not a part of it, and neither were women. Eventually, by mid-century, it would be narrowed down to just landowners, and not any landowner, not 1 acre, not 2 acre, but you had to be a landowner with at least 150 acres of land. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't own 150 acres of land, and that would be a steep price to pay for me to be able to vote today. That's a lot of money, and back then it was a lot of money too. So instead of becoming a more free society over here in the colonies, you might say it became more restrictive as the time went on. And it didn't get any better either. It didn't get any better for the women, for the indentured servants, for the African American slaves. It didn't get any better for a lot of people. And if you were wealthy and you had land and the ability, it only got better for you. And that was not the type of place that this place was supposed to turn into. The people that came over here initially had the thought of freedom and building their own empire, if you will. The ability to choose what religion they wanted, the ability to go wherever they felt like. Less and less people were having the rights to be able to do that eventually. The ruins directly behind me here is the ruins of the Ambler House. And this house was built in 1795, and it was a Georgian-style plantation house, which was supposed to be the centerpiece of that plantation. It was a big, beautiful house, but it was burned in 2 wars, to include the American Civil War. Eventually, when it was burned a 3rd time, in 1895, I believe, that's when the house was abandoned. And so the ruins are here still at colonial Jamestown. Now, this isn't really a house to the period of the colony itself, but it is on top of the colony, which would explain that a lot of the homes that were out here at that time were no longer here. A lot of the structures were gone and lost to time. Colonial Jamestown itself would take a long time to actually find, especially the fort. And it would end up being the destruction of a Civil War structure, an earthwork, that some of the most important stuff would be found out here because of it. And thus began the archaeological digging. At its best time, colonial Jamestown had everything you could need. They had people that worked farms, small plots in between their land. They had tailors, they had blacksmiths, seamstresses, many different trades out here, and it was just like any other city during the colonial period. And eventually it would be taxed just like a city during the colonial period. As you walk around here, out here near these structures, it's kind of cool to think that you're standing in a place of such fresh beginning in the colonial period. It's amazing. Lights up the imagination. Now what stands in the background there was one of the more modern churches here in Jamestown. And that's where we were just a minute ago when the music was playing. One of the first churches was actually right here at this location. And as we walk inside here, you can see where the bar would have been, the location where the preacher would have stood, and some of the most prominent people in this area are buried inside of the walls here. And so when they were doing some of the earlier excavations, they found those burial pits and the bodies that were placed here. Now, for those of you that are into the story of Pocahontas, the Disney fairy tale, if you will, the actual location where Pocahontas would have married John Rolfe was right here behind me. This would have been the church. Right here in the colony. All those years ago, next to this river, the James River. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed the video. This is but a small taste of what the Jamestown National Park has in store, and it's part of the historic triangle. The fee that you pay helps to preserve and keep this place going, and it's definitely well worth the price. So come on out here and check it out. Until next time, History with Waffles.